Okay. Thank you all very much for coming. So this talk is about data modeling, and with the title, Humans Do Not Have a Primary Key. I'm Christophe Pettus. I'm the CEO of PostgreSQL Experts, Inc. We're a Bay Area consultancy. We're tiny. That's my email address, and there is thebuild.com is my personal tech blog. There are a couple of links in this presentation. Both of them are linked to right now from that blog. And there's my Twitter account, on which I once in a long while talk about Postgres. Okay, I'm going to blaze through that. I'll take questions at the end, but please, if your question begins, it's more of a comment, save it for the hallway track. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to postulate that you have been hired to do some data modeling for a site called stupidlycheapaluminumsighting.ninja. This domain works, by the way. So the first thing, now whenever I start a new project and I'm really excited, because I love doing data modeling, and so the first thing I do is I sit down and I do a customer table. That's like the very, very, very first thing. So you sit down and do the customer table, and you do this. With Christian name, last name, and maiden name, because just in case the person got married while they were a customer. And you show this to a more experienced data modeling person, and the reaction is this. You say, oh, right. I'm sorry, I should have used a big cereal, not a cereal. No, that's not the problem. Oh, the maiden name thing. Okay, we'll take that out. Oh, okay. Christian name is obviously a little bit biased. We'll use first name. Okay, this is like every database in the world. This was, in fact, the default model without the big cereal in Django for years. Oh, oops, I forgot a middle initial. Okay, we're done, right? No. The problem is, this is a terrible, awful anti-pattern that is universal in data modeling of how to handle names. People's naming conventions are not that simple. Let's take an example. I assume everyone recognizes this person, Mao Zedong. My apologies for my horrible Chinese pronunciation. His family name is Mao, because for the vast majority of people in the world, the convention is that the family name, if they have one, comes first. Standard Western naming convention is in fact unusual in this regard. His given name is Dong, and the Zhe is a generational particle. However, what he would be addressed as among familiars is Zedong, not just Dong. So his first name, if you put that on a web form, you would say, please enter your first name. Well, that's literally Mao is the first one that appears in the name, but that's wrong by any standard definition. Think, well, okay, but we're not going to have a lot of Chinese customers. But this is not just China. This is still from a Hungarian film, Werkmeister Harmonies. It's a great film. Please check it out. It was made by a Hungarian director who, if you were introduced to him at an English language film festival, would be called Bela Tar. But that's not how his name is written in Hungary. Standard Hungarian order is that the last name appears first. So that's his family name, Tar, and that's his first name, Bela. Interesting. So it's like, okay, well, Hungary's weird. They always put the family name first, right? Wrong. If you are not have a standard Hungarian name, like the former Prime Minister of the UK, it's written with the personal name first. Unless you're a historic figure, in which case it's translated into Hungarian and written in standard Hungarian order. So again, first name, last name is just wrong. Okay. So now we know this. So, okay, go back and fix our model. Fine. We're going to call it given name and family name. Now, okay, problem solved. Now I'm going to get on to, wait, okay, but no, you're still not right. Because this is the former Prime Minister of Iceland, Johanna Sigurðardóttir. But Johanna is in fact her given name, but that's not a family name. So don't put family, because this is in her case a matronymic, unusually by Icelandic names. There are no family names in Iceland by law, with one exception, Vladimir Ashkenazi, who's an honorary Icelandic citizen. By law, they use patronymics or matronymics. So so this is the name of her mother with dottir added to the end. More traditionally, it's the name of the father, but her name is somewhat unusual in that regard. In fact, Icelandic phone books are sorted by first name because the last names are not generally used as the primary key to find people. Okay, fine. So we won't call it a family name. We'll call it an other name. Okay, now problem solved. Well, no, because you're still wrong. This is the former president of Indonesia, whose name was Suharto. He actually did have another first name, Muhammad, but like is very common in Islamic cultures, everybody is named Muhammad, so they don't use it. He had no last name, he had no family name, he had no other name except this single word. Fine. Okay, we'll put a default on it of empty string. Now have we solved the problem of naming people? No. Because here's the current Prime Minister of Spain. Like is true in many Latin countries, he has two last names, Rajoy Bray. Except no one ever uses Bray commonly, except in very, very formal legal circumstances. He always goes by Mayon or Rajoy, but he does have two last names. Similar, or family names. So it's like, okay, well, we know that, so we'll just delete the last one, right? Because that's, we'll take the second, no, because Portuguese does it the other way around. This is the current Prime Minister of Portugal. He has two first names, Antonio Luiz, and two last names, Santos da Costa, but everyone in common usage, he's just Antonio Costa. And these are not exactly exotic circumstances. And furthermore, you're making kind of a broad assumption when you call this a given name. After all, everyone knows this person as Madonna, but that was not her given name, or Cher, or Dr. Claw. Fine, okay. We'll just have a single field name and varchar 30. Okay, now we're done? Well, no. This gentleman's name is Filipe Juan Pablo Alfonso de Todos los Santos y Bourbon y Grija, which is 64 characters long. Fine, we'll make it a text field. Are you happy now? Oh, right, and we should probably make that a UUID, but that's my personal preference. So let's talk about a little bit why you want this information. Why are you collecting this information? Probably because you want to send out promotional emails. So fine, this person typed in this long name, and we'll take the very first particle and the very last particle, combine it to form a name, and use that as the salutation. What could possibly be wrong about that? Well, you do that and Spain declares war, because you've just insulted the head of the King of Spain, because no one uses that form of address for him. So assuming you have this web form where you say type in your legal name, and then you start parsing it and building things out of it, you'll get it wrong. But then you think, well, okay, the real problem is we didn't give them a title, and people need titles for these kinds of things. So we'll just have a drop down. This is from a real website. Okay. I guess maybe they'll fix it to this, and now the problem is solved. Titles and honorifics are a really complicated problem. This is the one from British Airways. It's pretty cool. I really want to put Baroness in there for myself, but I get into all kinds of passport trouble. This is Lufthansa. And if you ever look at the way Austrians do honorifics, oh my goodness. So this is a very complicated, very culturally specific problem. I mean, you think, okay, well, maybe we just need to drop down, and one of the options way down at the bottom is Your Majesty. Now at least we'll keep Spain happy. Okay, so we'll make the title of our varchar 30 not null. And so we send this email. Well, it's better. It's not quite as rude, at least, but you really didn't mean to do this. This is not the goal you're trying to accomplish. So let's talk about why you want to do this. And this is the important thing to remember in all of these decisions is, what is the business goal? In this case, it was really simple. You just wanted to know what someone wanted to be called. You didn't really need to know their name, did you? You didn't need to understand, you weren't trying to match them against the government database. This wasn't this wasn't for a credit card application. Probably the King of Spain has that covered in other ways. You were the core business goal here was we want to personalize the email. So personalize the email. Ask them specifically, what do they want to be called? Don't collect information that you don't need, or or overly specify the question. If they need to, what you're trying to do is customize the email, let the user customize the email. Don't automatically fall into this I'll ask for your first name, I'll ask for your last name, problem solved. Okay, so now we finally have our databases. We just have a field that, what do I want to be called? Much better. And we send this email with Hi, Your Majesty. Much nicer. Just something else to remember about names. Names can have medial caps. So don't just absorb a name, convert it to uppercase of the database, and then do capital case to output it, because you'll end up with a name that will be that at least you're telling your user, I don't really care what your name is. I don't really care what you want to be called. I'm just going to do this computer thing. Names can contain white space. You can generally compact white space. I'm not aware of any naming convention where one space versus two spaces is distinctive, but white space itself is very distinctive. And so you need to preserve it, and you need to not reject it. And please don't reject non-alphabetic characters. This is an astonishingly common problem with people with dashes in their name. They have a hyphenated last or family or personal name or individual name, and the database, the system rejects it with your name must be only have alphabetic characters in it. Well, you're telling me what my name has to be? It's very important not to do that. In fact, there's a whole website that is pages upon pages upon pages of the details of personal names. It's from the W3. Not only does it go into a great deal of detail about all of this, but it links to hundreds upon other pages to go into the naming conventions worldwide. The main use of this is to show you that you cannot make any assumptions about how people are named. So you check that. If you're doing data modeling that involves human beings, check that out. Okay, but we finally understand about names, so we're not going to do anything weird and that sort of thing. And then you go on, and the next thing you want to do is you want to take payments, right? I mean, you are selling aluminum siding, you want to get paid. And so you pop open the API document, and it has required fields, and it has this. And so what do you do in these cases? Because very frequently you'll bump into these APIs, like this one, that demands a first and a last name. The answer is present a first name and last name field to the customer for credit card processing purposes and let them sort it out. They're holding the credit card in their hand. And people who have names that do not follow these standard first name, last name conventions are used to this by now. Let them sort it out. For example, I have a credit card that has Mr. C. Pettus on it. Do I put in the Mr. or I don't? Generally, I've discovered if the site cares about actually checks the name, which many of them don't. Many of them ask for this and require it in the API and then never do anything with it. It wants the actual text, so the MR space C on it. But give the user control over this. Don't just demand a first name, last name, because somehow you'll use it later. And make it clear what it's being used for. Besides just being sort of good data hygiene, it also lets the user solve your problem for you by saying because people who are from, for example, Arab Islamic cultures that have gigantic names, they know how to break it apart to get American Express to accept it. So let them do the work. Yeah, and this is my reaction when I'm presented with one of these first name, last name fields. Okay, let's talk a little bit about brand expansion. So the aluminum siding business is doing sufficiently well. You decide to expand it to kitchen gadgets and power tools, because that's an obvious brand expansion from aluminum siding. And of course, only women are interested in kitchen gadgets and only men are interested in power tools, right? That is a fundamental nature of humanity. So we're going to add a gender field, which is a car 1, not null. And you present this, and the reaction is, you have to be kidding. They go, oh, no, all right, we're sorry, I forgot the check constraint. Because it can only have 2 values, male or female. Yeah, okay, so that's the reaction to that. And you go, oh, God, what did I screw up? Oh, I know, I need an other. Now the problem's solved. Okay. A startlingly large number of sites ask for gender. For example, I have gone to buy a compact disc and had a mandatory 2-entry MF gender field. You're going to send me a pink one or a blue one? You know, is there some kind of sex-linked characteristic? If I put in the wrong thing, you're going to tell me you don't like that kind of music? What in the world are they thinking? What they're thinking is, we want it for marketing purposes, and the answer is, that's just too bad, you don't get it. It's very important to think this through. There's often a lot of pressure on developers to gather as much data as possible for every contact because they want it for marketing or statistical purposes. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on with gender. Specifically, curiosity is not a sufficiently good reason to collect this kind of data from people. Setting aside any legal implications, you are asking a question that fundamentally cannot be answered in a reasonable way. There are times that you have to ask this question. Some of them are good reasons, some of them are bad reasons, but they're still reasons. Reason number 1, that's a good reason. You're a medical provider. However, if you're a medical provider, presumably you have enough knowledge to understand that, for example, for biologically at birth, 1 in 1,000 people cannot easily answer the question, are you male or female? Intersex is very common in humans. So if you're a medical provider, you need to be able to handle that situation because you're trying to provide medical care to them. The one other reason that you have to ask for sex is if you're an airline. Because the Transportation Safety Administration of the United States of America requires that you send gender as an M or an F. That is a stupid reason, but it is a reason. It is a legally mandated reason. But those are really the only 2 reasons I can think of to ever ask for this information. Because marketing analysis, which is the usual reason it's being handed up, is just another name for curiosity. Let's be honest. It's much better if you're going to do marketing analysis behaviorally on what people actually buy. I use kitchen kitchen gadgets and power tools as an example because, in fact, in my household, my wife uses all the power tools, and I do all the cooking. So the gender stereotype is, the traditional gender stereotype is reversed there. So instead of worrying about what gender people are, worry about their behavior. Here's an interesting article. This was written in the context of Proposition 8 in California a while back about the biological nature of sex and humanity and how many intersex people there are and things like that. So it's a fascinating analysis of this. Okay, so we've managed to get through the gender thicket, but we say we want to introduce a family plan. We want people to be multiple families to collect reward points for their aluminum siding purchases. Okay, it's not an unreasonable thing to want, because this is what a family looks like, right? So this is what we're going to model. We're going to have a father and a mother field, which is a foreign key reference back into the table. And notice they're not null because everyone has a father and a mother, right? Okay, well that didn't work out. Okay, we'll make them not null because maybe somebody's an orphan, or maybe they're a parent and we don't really care what they're. Yeah, okay, that's not right. So we'll just call, because people can have parent, we're not going to assign gender roles. We're going to be so thoughtful here. We're going to call them parent 1 and parent 2. What do we do about step parents? Suppose we have a child who has 2 biological parents, one of which is custodial, one of which is not, and there's a step parent. Oh yeah, that's a bad problem. Okay, we'll just add a 3rd parent field. Okay, this isn't working out at all. Okay, we're going to create a relationships table. We're going to have a from customer and a to customer and a relationships type, and then we're going to start modeling we're going to build a model of what constitutes a family inside our aluminum siding application. This sounds like a great use of our time. Oh, right, relationships begin and end, so we'll add a TSTZ range. So we know precisely to the millisecond when someone became a parent. Wow, this is a sophisticated model. I like this. Okay, stop, stop, stop. Modeling families is a very common problem in these kinds of things, and in surprising cases. Obviously, Facebook and companies like that love to build these kinds of models because they're very inquisitive about people, but a surprising number of companies get into this family thing. For example, British Airways has what they call a family plan, or where you can pool your rewards points, which is very handy. Their definition of a family is everyone who lives at the same, gets their mail at the same address constitutes a family, which is very handy because, as it happens, my PA has her mail sent to my address. So, but it's a very generic form of family, and they don't really care as long as you all get your mail at the same place, which is fine. So, a company that got into trouble, who I will not name, but you can probably intuit from this, makes a video game console. And they decided they wanted to have because everybody has monthly subscriptions, they had monthly subscriptions, and they wanted to have a family plan. Because the idea is you didn't want to have the father and the mother and the 5 children and everybody else all paying the full subscription fee, and people were balking at that. Okay, you can see the marketing department dreaming this up. So they said, okay, we're going to have a family plan. The rules are you all have to live at the same address, and you can only be on one family plan. Now, this means that if you are a step-parent, your child has to pick which game console they can play on. You can, if you are two parents that live apart, they have to be on one family. That child has to be on one or the other family plan, and they have to pick. So you have to tell your 9-year-old child which visitation period they can play video games on. If any of you don't even have to be a parent, which I am not, to process that this might be problematic to tell your 9-year-old, when you visit mother, you can't play video games. There was a certain amount of controversy about this, because the real problem was, of course, they didn't want the discount to be abused. They didn't really care what a family was. I mean, why would they? What they wanted was not that everybody, that you had suddenly one person had 23 relatives all piling onto the same family plan, which is from a business point of view understandable, but they got themselves into extremely hot water by mapping that into, we're going to tell you what your family can be like. So if you find yourself in a situation of telling people what the parameters of their family can be, think very carefully if you are going down the right path. Another example of this is there is a very large healthcare organization in California which provides medical insurance to a great many people. A child, a minor, can have up to 2 people who are medically responsible for them, who can make medical decisions on their behalf. So, if you have 2 custodial parents and a step-parent, if the 2 custodial parents are that child's medically responsible people, the step-parent can't make medical decisions on their behalf if, for example, they got into a car accident coming back from school driving that child. So this is because they're trying to, do the right thing and limit the amount of people, or they're not doing the right thing at all. It's just that they have a database that was designed in 1973 and can't change it. But this creates real-world problems when a child is in the emergency room. Neither of the people who happen to be on the record is involved. Somebody who the child lives with can't make medical decisions for. So approach this kind of modeling with extreme care, and above all, why are you asking these questions? If, for example, you're a video game console maker and your basic answer is, we want to limit the number of people who can be on a family plan, just set a limit. Say 4 people, say 5 people, pick a number. You'll run into problems, you'll run into other problems because, of course, someone has 7 children, this is going to be an issue. But you need to approach this from the point of view of the business process, not from the point of view of, we are going to tell you what a family can be like. Similarly, you need to understand that families are very, very complicated things and always have been. This is, despite the image of the 1950s family, families have always been a complicated thing to model, and everyone has their own idea of what constitutes a family. Okay. The next thing is, the next marketing request comes down is we want to give people birthday coupons. So we're going to ask people for their birthday. And we want to customize it by saying which specific birthday it is, or we want to vary the discount depending on how old someone is. So we need to know their year of birth as well. So we're going to add a date of birth field, and we're going to make it mandatory. They can't register for the site without date of birth. This has happened to me also. Well, I think when I was buying, I forget what I was buying, it was something really weird. You know, it was like kitchen implements, and it was demanding my date of birth with a year. Again, so why are you doing this? Because one of the problems is I have been able to get access to, fortunately, I was not hacking anyone, this was my own personal bank account, knowing my mailing address and my date of birth. That was the only things I needed to authenticate myself to the bank. This is extremely easy information to derive. I assure you, 10 minutes of Googling and you can find this out about about me. Because if nothing else, any property owner, there's going to be property tax records, and so you're already got the address nailed. So now suddenly you have this very sensitive information in there. Also, not everyone is wild about revealing how old they are. So you need to think very carefully about whether or not this is information you actually need. And again, marketing analytics is not sufficient reasons. For example, here's another, I'm dragging British Airways pretty badly here, poor guys, but, and gals. But for example, here is their great security question to let me change things. Enter my date of birth. Yeah, okay. That information is widely publicly available. It doesn't take any work at all to find out what anyone's date of birth is. So, you know, and I'm also amused by the solemnity with which they ask this, as if they are asking, they're asking for the nuclear launch code here by my entering my date of birth. So again, be judicious about what information you ask for people. Okay. So you've decided to expand your aluminum siding business into a social network because no one can get funding for aluminum siding, but anyone can get funding for another social network now. So one of the things you want to build is a social network, and you want people to have like all their life information in here because you want it to be a very sticky site. You want people coming back all the time. And so you say, well, okay, I want, enter like your kids' appointments and things like your doctor, soccer and doctors and things like that. Prescriptions, because, you want to keep track of your kids' prescriptions and things like that. So you literally have a field that says this. Enter your child's prescriptions here. I made up this HTML, of course, but this is actually taken from a real site. It's a social network. It was under design. They dropped this feature under encouragement, but they were going to ask for every kid's prescriptions, and they were going to record that in the database, and you could pull it up at any time. What's possibly not to like about this? Well, because you're about to careen into an extremely highly legislated area, which is at the point that you are asking for medical information of any kind, and this includes prescriptions and this includes doctor's visits, you're subject to HIPAA, the Healthcare Information Portability and Accountability Act, which mandates to some degree exactly what you can do with personally identifiable health information. If you're not familiar with HIPAA, and you don't want to be asking for this information because it's even more strict than PCI, the payment card industry standard that covers credit card information. It's a US standard, but if you're in the EU, the EU Information Privacy Directive, 9546 EC, covers healthcare information and a lot more. So you need to be very, very careful about asking for this kind of information. And again, don't ask for it unless you have a specific need for it. If you're going to be a healthcare management site, then build a healthcare management site. But don't just drift into this kind of stuff, because you can get into a lot of trouble. And also, what are you doing asking for people's prescriptions anyway? Again, focus on the business needs. So this has been a lot of ranting and blathering on about what's bad. So let's talk about, let me give you some general principles as somebody who's built a lot of databases. The first thing is, when you're modeling people, personal experience is worthless. Everybody has their personal experiences about what names are like, what families are like, what kind of information they feel comfortable and not comfortable sharing. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg had the famous quote that anyone who has more than one name demonstrates a lack of integrity, which showed a breathtaking lack of experience about what things are like in the real world, because there are a lot of people who have stalkers, who have violent exes, who are in witness protection programs, who have a lot of reasons to need to change their names. And it's not, whether or not he's an evil guy, I will leave to other people to decide. But the core of that the core problem of that observation is he personally can't understand why he would ever need another name. He's Mark fucking Zuckerberg, he's a very public individual. But his personal experience did not translate to a general rule here. Similarly, your idea of what a family is probably not what the person next to you's idea of a family is. And attempts to model based on your personal experience will inevitably be limiting because everybody's conducting your own life in a planet of 7 billion people. So do research. This is an area that has been studied and studied and studied. It always pains me slightly when programmers go out and reinvent things that have been pounded to death by sociologists. This is publicly available research. So understand, if you insist on modeling this for some reason, engage with people who can or do this research, if this is the kind of thing you want to model. For example, the name thing, way back when Django, I love Django, by the way, it's my favorite web framework, build all sorts of stuff in it, but they finally did a major revision of the system, specifically in order to eliminate the name problem. But if the people who were setting up Django way back when had stopped and thought about, maybe my idea of what a name is, based on the people sitting around me, is not a great idea, they may have avoided this whole problem. Similarly, undermodel. Don't try and collect every possible bit of data about people. Don't ask for date of birth unless you need it for legal or compliance reasons. If the idea is you want to send people birthday specials, say, we would like to send you a birthday special. On which date would you like it sent? I guarantee you I will pick January 1st, which is not my birthday. If you ask people what they want to be called, don't say, enter your legal name. Unless you are actually, if you are building a site for the Transportation Safety Administration, if you are doing security clearances, sure. But you know that stuff. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about general database modeling. And for that kind of thing, ask the question you want answered, not what you think, not sort of the routine, enter your first name, enter your last name question. You will both generate a better data model, and you will piss off a lot fewer people. And generally under-collect data. It is always better to model on the basis of behavior than on user input. For one thing, users generally don't want to fill out a giant form just to buy something. So you'll probably get better conversions this way if what you're doing. But generally, you want to take in less data, because the less data you take in, the less data you will have that is wrong. For example, the first name, last name problem, people who have a single name, and there are lots of them, are used to this. They're confronted with these web forms all the time. And I'll tell you what they do. They put their name in either first or last and mash the keyboard for the other. Or put in Mr. Or screw you. Or something for the other one. Is that the data you want in your database? Well, no, of course not. That's effectively, they're creating database corruption for you, and you've invited them to do so. So don't do that. It is, when you're modeling people have their own models in their heads about what they're about. Use those. And over-communicate. When you ask for something, if it's something involving a personal characteristic, tell people why you do it. And it doesn't have to be the click here for the 5,000 pages of boring legal boilerplate that no one ever reads. If you're going to send people an email saying, we'd like to personalize your email, what would you like to be called? If you want to send promotional coupons, say, what's a special date for you? What date would you like us to do? Because you don't need to know their birth date. You know, old people, young people, yes, they have different demographic characteristics, but base that on the behavior on your site. So ask for what you want, and people will give it to you. You've also given that because now you're engaging them and giving them an opportunity to express themselves and use their own model in their head of what they're about. And I guarantee you, people will really respond to that. Similarly, if you'd like to know, if you want to have a family plan, call it a group discount, say, invite 7 people to join your group. Don't do a family plan. Don't try and model this kind of behavior. And understand what will happen in the case of people who aren't fully in control of their own decisions, like minors, when 2 separate people want to be part of the same group. When one person wants to be part of the group. Generally, allow things by default, because every time you think you've found what people think of as a family or think of as a social group, someone will surprise you. There's a reason that Facebook added it's complicated as a relationship status. And always focus on the core need. Ask, if you want to send discounts, ask for that. If you want to call people something, ask for that. Don't spend a lot of time trying to back engineer that or trick people into giving you information. Because you'll just get bad information, because they won't be tricked right. Even if you think you're being very clever, they're cleverer, because they do this kind of thing all the time. And that's the presentation. Thank you very much. And there's me again. And there's my company. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have any studies that show how much richer data you get when you phrase the questions the right way versus making assumptions?
The question is, are there actual studies that show the quality of data? That's a very good question, and there are some. I'll link to a couple on my blog. The problem is there aren't a lot of these in the field. You know, that this is the part of it is that web forms tended to grow out of credit card processing. There's this really unfortunate fact that credit card processing has very strict, you know, is like the API that demands a first name, last name, you know, and no middle name. And oh, by the way, that particular API rejects white space in names and won't take Unicode. Yeah, that's you know, really sensitive to internationalization there, guys. And it won't take ampersand. You know, it's like I have to run, you know, I basically strip out all the bad characters and feed it over, and then they don't check it against the database, so I'm not even sure why they're asking for it. The ones that have been done show that engagement does go way up, especially for international and underserved populations, because those are the kinds of people who hit these things and go, again. I mean, humans are adaptable, and generally, if a human runs it, you know, if a human who does not have a traditional first name, last name hits one of these things, they know the drill, you know. But the important thing to understand is you're forcing a very personal thing into a very fixed model. And if you just ask for what you need, engagement does tend to go up. But I'll have to push the link to the study because you don't have to just believe me. Yeah.
I'm curious if there's additional problems that come up if you allow people to change their name, because people do change their names not only to get married, they're all kinds of reasons. You're talking about, so but most sites won't let you change your name.
Right, which is kind of absurd. You know, it's funny because even there are a lot of sites which, in fact, won't let you change your name at all or have very strict requirements for doing so. Sometimes, you know, this leads into another problem, which is using names to validate identity. Some of these have legal reasons, and I'm not going to get into those because, you know, I could argue the law endlessly, but I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legislator, so there's only so much I can do about it. For example, a lot of airline reservation sites, because they have to feed this information to the TSA, have very strict rules about changing your profile information. Because they feel at least legally on the hook if they feed this stuff over. You know, aluminum siding companies, why are you asking for this information? You know, why is this so important? Then you have financial institutions who often have reporting requirements. One of the things that is anybody who legally has to ask for a social security number. Well, social security number is an interesting digression because, you know, back when computers started to becoming a thing, we realized that people don't have primary keys, so the United States decided to give people primary keys, which they called a social security number. It's generally gone really badly. Because first of all, anytime you give people a primary key like that, it immediately becomes a fraud target, so as Social Security numbers are. You have to give it to a lot of people because otherwise it's useless as a primary key because you're not using it to identify yourself. But but as soon as people know it, they can use it to identify themselves as you. So it's like the worst possible security mechanism for this kind of thing, to the point that everybody started using using it as a primary key. For example, for a long time, the U.S. military, the Social Security was your registration number in the U.S. military, and then they dumped that because it was becoming a fraud target. For a long time, medical records were kept under your Social Security number, and then they made that illegal because it was becoming a fraud target. So,
They're also not random.
well, no, yeah, they're extremely predictable. You know, it's like I have a small company, and 3 of my employees have the same 3 digits, including myself. I and 2 of my employees have the same first 3 digits because we're from California. You know, so yeah, it's nuts. Financial institutions, anyone who is legally required to ask for a Social Security number in the United States is in a special problem because the Social Security number and the name have to match, or the IRS kicks it back, or sends you this very complicated procedural note, which is a shame, you know, and kind of not very friendly. But outside of those realms, make sure people can change their names because they do all the time for all sorts of reasons, and you know, passe Mark Zuckerberg for perfectly good reasons. Yes, sir.
So there's a large social network that requires you to input your birthday to join it, and I noticed that they only allow you to change said birthday, I think, 3 times. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Why are they asking for? I mean,
I think it's 13 and under.
yeah, there's one reason that people ask for birth date all the time is to validate how old you are. Honestly, any computer literate 12-year-old knows that drill. So why they do that, I don't know. Just have a checkbox or you know something like that. As you might have guessed from the tenor of this talk, I'm fundamentally against people asking for birth date unless it's a legal requirement. So I think they shouldn't be asking for it at all. Whenever I have one of those, I input a fake birth date, which means occasionally on close friends I get these inappropriate birthday greetings, but whatever. You know, they're thinking of me. I appreciate it. Because you know I like screwing with systems, also part of my job. But yeah, that kind of thing I think is basically nuts. I can totally understand the process, and I mean, sure, any geek can understand the process of like, well, we need this data because we need to validate 13 and under. But the problem is, again, they're focused on people who have normal lives as far as they're concerned, which is not.
So it sounds like this is a standardization problem, right? So like I work for a financial company.
Mm-hmm.
We integrate with like 20 different people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not collecting any of this information to use it personally. I just need you to give me that because I need to give it to someone else because otherwise I can't send you the money.
Right.
Or I can't debit it.
I mean, and one of the things I will say as a general caveat to this talk is there are a lot of companies that are, for better or worse reasons, which could be debated endlessly, but which I won't, certainly not in this forum, are legally required to collect this information and match it, like Social Security number. Because if the 1099 doesn't match, bang, you get this hostile letter from the IRS saying, fix it. And in those cases, you have to follow the legal requirement. But a large number of sites, unfortunately, are guided by that kind of site to ask for data they don't actually really need.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
My question was going to be, how do you fix model, right? Because usually what you end up with is some sort of like a matrix problem. Because this person requires this, this, and this, and then this person requires a middle initial, and then this person allows Unicode. This person does not like white spaces. So eventually, what ends up happening is that you have this explosion of requirements, right? And you try to like force them into a bucket.
Yeah.
And you're like just giving your first and last name because that's the common denominator that everyone's happy with.
Right.
And that's a standard that's evolved over time. And it's a poor standard, I agree. Right? So what do we do about that?
Well, I mean, you don't have a huge number of choices. What I would do is, you ask for the minimum, intersection possible that you can get away with, and then, to the extent possible, make it the computer's problem to do the standardization. For example, if it's like let them enter Unicode and strip it. Now, again, I've run into situations where even that wasn't acceptable because the way you strip Unicode isn't the way they strip Unicode. You could also tell people, we enter your name as it appears on your Social Security card, which is because then you're saying, because also help them do the right thing. You know, a lot of, if you just say enter your given name, people will go, well, but like it might, like, you know, I changed my first name, so which one do I enter? You know, because I don't know what you're going to match against. If you say if you say enter your name as it appears on your Social Security card, I know what to do. Enter it as it appears on your tax returns. I know what to do. So, last questions before we sign off. Excellent. Thank you very much.